Hello, welcome to Storytime. I'm Glenna Coleman, Youth Services Librarian at the Weathersfield Proctor Library. And this is our library bear. You may have noticed that today he has on his traveling hat. He is getting a little tired of sitting here on a chair going nowhere, so we have decided to read some stories about going places. The first story we're going to read is by David Shannon, and it's called Duck on a Bike. I wonder where that duck might go. For Emma, quack. Duck on a bike. One day, down on the farm, Duck got a wild idea. I bet I could ride a bike, he thought. He waddled over to where the boy parked his bike, climbed on, and began to ride. At first, he rode very slowly, and he wobbled a lot. But it was fun. Duck rode past Cow and waved to her. "Hello, Cow," said Duck. "Moo," said Cow. But what she thought was, "A duck on a bike? That's the silliest thing I've ever seen." Then Duck rode past Sheep. "Hello, Sheep," said Duck. "Bah," said Sheep. But what she thought was, "He's going to hurt himself if he's not careful." Duck was riding better now. He rode past Dog. "Hello, Dog," said Duck. "Woof," said Dog. But what he thought was, "This is a mighty neat trick." Then Duck rode past Cat. "Hello, Cat," said Duck. "Meow," said Cat. But what she thought was, "I wouldn't waste my time riding a bike." Duck pedaled a little faster. He rode past Horse. "Hello, Horse," said Duck. "Neigh," said Horse. But what he thought was, "You're still not as fast as me, Duck." Duck rang his bell as he rode toward Chicken. "Hello, Chicken," said Duck. "Cluck, cluck," said Chicken. But what she thought was, "Watch where you're going, Duck." Then Duck rode past Goat. "Hello, Goat," said Duck. "Meh," said Goat. But what he thought was, "I'd like to eat that bike." Duck stood on the seat and rode past Pig and Pig. "Hello, Pigs," said Duck. "Oink," said Pig and Pig. But what they thought was, "Duck is such a show-off." Then Duck rode no hands past Mouse. "Hello, Mouse," said Duck. "Squeak," said Mouse. But what he thought was, "I wish I could ride a bike just like Duck." Suddenly, a whole bunch of kids came down the road on bikes. They were in such a hurry that they didn't see Duck. They parked their bikes by the house and went inside. Now all the animals had bikes. They rode around and around the barnyard. "This is fun," they all said. "Good idea, Duck." Then they put the bikes back by the house, and no one knew that on that afternoon there had been a cow, a sheep, a dog, a cat, a horse, a chicken, a goat, 2 pigs, a mouse, and a duck on a bike. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed our first story of Going Places. This was Duck on a Bike by David Shannon. Our next book about going places is called Miss Rumphius. The story and the pictures are by Barbara Cooney. Oh, it's just about time for Lupins, isn't it? Oh, you know what? We already skipped a page. Let's go back. Here we go. The Lupin lady lives in a small house overlooking the sea. In between the rocks, around her house grow blue and purple and rose-colored flowers. The Lupin lady is little and old, but she has not always been that way. I know. She is my great aunt, and she told me so. Once upon a time, she was a little girl named Alice, who lived in a city by the sea. From the front stoop, she could see the wharves and the bristling masts of tall ships. Many years ago, her grandfather had come to America on a large sailing ship. Now he worked in the shop at the bottom of the house, making figureheads for the prows of ships and carving Indians out of wood to put in front of cigar stores. For Alice's grandfather was an artist. He painted pictures, too, of sailing ships and places across the sea. When he was very busy, Alice helped him put in the skies. In the evening, Alice sat on her grandfather's knee and listened to his stories of faraway places. When he had finished, Alice would say, "When I grow up, I too will go to faraway places, and when I grow old, I too will live beside the sea." "That is all very well, little Alice," said her grandfather, "but there is a third thing you must do." "What is that?" asked Alice. "You must do something to make the world more beautiful," said her grandfather. "All right," said Alice, but she did not know what that could be. In the meantime, Alice got up and washed her face and ate porridge for breakfast. She went to school and came home and did her homework, and pretty soon she was grown up. Then my great-aunt Alice set out to do the 3 things she had told her grandfather she was going to do. She left home and went to live in another city far from the sea and the salt air. There she worked in a library, dusting books and keeping them from getting mixed up, and helping people find the ones they wanted. Some of the books told her about faraway places. People called her Miss Rumphius now. Sometimes she went to the conservatory in the middle of the park. When she stepped inside on a wintry day, the warm air wrapped itself around her, and the sweet smell of jasmine filled her nose. "This is almost like a tropical isle," said Miss Rumphius, "but not quite." So Miss Rumphius went to a real tropical island where people kept cockatoos and monkeys as pets. She walked on long beaches picking up beautiful shells. One day she met the Bapa Raja, king of a fishing village. "You must be tired," he said. Come into my house and rest." So Miss Rumphius went in and met the Bapa Raja's wife. The Bapa Raja himself fetched a green coconut and cut a slice off the top so that Miss Rumphius could drink the coconut water inside. Before she left, the Bapa Raja gave her a beautiful mother-of-pearl shell on which he had painted a bird of paradise and the words, "You will always remain in my heart. You will always remain in mine, too," said Miss Rumphius. My great-aunt, Miss Alice Rumphius, climbed tall mountains where the snow never melted. She went through jungles and across deserts. She saw lions playing and kangaroos jumping, and everywhere she made friends she would never forget. Finally, she came to the land of the lotus eaters, and there, getting off a camel, she hurt her back. "What a foolish thing to do," said Miss Rumphius. "Well, I have certainly seen faraway places. Maybe it is time to find my place by the sea." And it was, and she did. From the porch of her new house, Miss Rumphius watched the sun come up. She watched it cross the heavens and sparkle on the water, and she saw it set in glory in the evening. She started a little garden among the rocks that surrounded her house, and she planted a few flower seeds in the stony ground. Miss Rumphius was almost perfectly happy. "But there is still one more thing I have to do," she said. "I have to do something to make the world more beautiful." "But what? The world is already pretty nice," she thought, looking out over the ocean. The next spring, Miss Rumphius was not very well. Her back was bothering her again, and she had to stay in bed most of the time. The flowers she had planted the summer before had come up and bloomed in spite of the stony ground. She could see them from her bedroom window, blue and purple and rose-colored. "Lupins," said Miss Rumphius with satisfaction. "I have always loved lupins the best. I wish I could plant more seeds in the summer so that I could have still more flowers next year." But she was not able to. After a hard winter, spring came. Miss Rumphius was feeling much better. Now she could take walks again. One afternoon she started to go up and over the hill, where she had not been in a long time. "I don't believe my eyes," she cried when she got to the top, for there on the other side of the hill was a large patch of blue and purple and rose-colored lupins. "It was the wind," she said, as she knelt in delight. "It was the wind that brought the seeds from my garden here, and the birds must have helped." Then Miss Rumphius had a wonderful idea. She hurried home and got out her seed catalogs. She sent off for the very best seed house for 5 bushels of lupin seed. All that summer, Miss Rumphius, her pockets full of seeds, wandered over fields and headlands, sowing lupins. She scattered seeds along the highways and down the country lanes. She flung handfuls of them around the schoolhouse and back of the church. She tossed them into hollows and along stone walls. Her back didn't hurt her any more at all. Now, some people called her that crazy old lady. The next spring, there were lupins everywhere. Fields and hillsides were covered with blue and purple and rose-colored flowers. They bloomed all along the highways and down the lanes. Bright patches lay around the schoolhouse and back of the church. Down in the hollows and along the stone walls grew the beautiful flowers. Miss Rumphius had done the most difficult thing of all. My great-aunt Alice, Miss Rumphius, is very old now. Her hair is very white. Every year there are more and more lupins. Now they call her the Lupin Lady. Sometimes my friends stand with me outside her gate, curious to see the old lady who planted the fields of lupins. When she invites us in, they come slowly. They think she is the oldest woman in the world. Often she tells us stories of faraway places. When I grow up, I tell her, I too will go to faraway places and come home to live by the sea. That is all very well, little Alice, says my aunt, but there is a third thing you must do. What is that? I ask. You must do something to make the world more beautiful. All right, I say. But I do not know yet what that can be. This story about going places was Miss Rumphius, a story and pictures by Barbara Cooney. And here's our last book about going places. This book is called The Relatives Came. This story is by Cynthia Ryland and it's illustrated by Stephen Gammell. The relatives came. Oh, there's a suitcase and some sneakers and a teddy bear. I guess they're coming to stay for a while anyway. Oh my goodness, there's lots of luggage. I wonder how many relatives there are. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car. And in it, they put an ice chest full of soda pop, and some boxes of crackers, and some bologna sandwiches. And up they came from Virginia. They left at 4 in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. They drove all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses and different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. So they drank up all their soda pop, and they ate up all their crackers, and traveled up all those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. Then it was hugging time. Talk about hugging. Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. They hugged us for hours. Then it was into the house, and so much laughing, and shining faces and hugging in the doorways. You'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front room. Those relatives! And finally, after a big supper, 2 or 3 times around until we all got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s through the house. Have you ever had so many people in your house you had to eat in shifts like that? I have. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras, so a few squeezed in with us and the rest slept on the floor, some with their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. It was different, going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. They ate up all our strawberries and melons. then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. Well, it looks like they're playing some music too. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chest and headed back to Virginia at 4 in the morning. We stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road. Then we crawled back into our beds that felt too big and too quiet. We fell asleep. And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night. And while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses in different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about the next summer. And there are their purple grapes. This story was The Relatives Came. Story by Cynthia Ryland, illustrations by Stephen Gammell. Well, I hope you enjoyed our stories about going places. Library Bear, are you happy that you went some places with us today? I think you are. All right. Say goodbye to everybody. We'll see you next time. This was Glenna Coleman, Youth Services Librarian at the Weathersfield Proctor Library. See you for our next story time.